pretty weak run, that first one, so.
Let's do it.
Well, you can tell, look at that. Look at that material coming on the end of that. It's still really dirty.
It is, yeah. Pretty good hole, Wano.
Go on that bank, huh? Maybe?
Just gonna do a little test on their coarse tailings coming off. See if there's gold coming out of it.
Deep in an abandoned mining district, where rusted rails disappear into the sagebrush and stories whisper through the wind, Freddy Dodge and Juan Ibarra returned on a hunch. Old-timers once spoke of a ghost vein, a ribbon of gold so mysterious that it revealed itself only once every few generations. Most believed it had vanished forever, swallowed by shifting earth and fading memory. But legends have a funny way of waiting for the right pair of hands. Freddy and Juan began with nothing more than a metal scan and instinct. The first readings came back faint, then sharper, then violently rich. Dust turned to excitement. Excitement turned to disbelief. They dug deeper, chipping at rock that hadn't seen daylight for over 100 years, until their pans lit up with color so bright it looked unreal. This wasn't just a promising streak. It was a $9.7 million ghost vein, the biggest hidden jackpot the region had ever seen. Their machines thundered to life. Every scoop uncovered more gold-rich pay, thick and heavy, gold so pure it clung to their gloves and pan edges like syrup. Seasoned miners would call it impossible. Freddy and Juan just called it their greatest breakthrough yet. But success didn't come easy. With collapsing walls, equipment pushed to its limits, and the clock ticking, every move risked losing the vein forever. They fought the earth, the elements, and their own fear, because buried below was more than gold. It was a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. And after one explosive final dig, the truth shone brighter than fire itself. They hadn't just found the ghost vein, they'd conquered it. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to follow more real-world treasure hunts and discoveries. Stay with us, because this remarkable $9.7 million breakthrough is only the beginning, and the chapters ahead may reveal even deeper secrets still waiting in the earth below. Freddy Dodge and Juan Ibarra's journey began in a stretch of land most miners had written off decades earlier. The terrain lay far from the noise of modern camps, out beyond ghost town foundations and collapsed shafts left behind by the late 1800s Klondike Gold Rush Trail. The old prospector's tale they carried was barely more than a breath, a hidden vein that flickered in and out of the earth, seen once, then lost again beneath rock and silence. Records from the 1890s mentioned a promising shaft collapsed in winter storms. 23 men gave chase to the underground channel, yet none ever found its end. No official survey marked it, only whispers remained. When Freddy and Juan arrived, the year was nearing its final thaw, late July 2024. The ground had barely recovered from spring runoff. Mud still clung thick around their tires, their boots pressed into snow-washed gravel, each step sinking into history. The equipment they carried wasn't just heavy. It represented everything they had learned in years of chasing the smallest clues. This wasn't a reckless dig. It was methodical, scientific, and precise, built from a lifetime of experience. They began by mapping the hillside, laying out slow, careful scans with advanced mineral sensors. The readings were faint at first, tiny, metallic spikes scattered beneath uneven shale. Freddy kept his voice low, noting that older miners never worked deeper than 15 meters here. Juan marked the grid, 200 yards wide, 60 feet deep potential, and rich in quartz ribbons that often ran parallel to old water channels. Rumors whispered the vein moved like a spirit, appearing where no logical survey could predict. but geology told a different story, one hidden beneath erosion, fault lines, and centuries of pressure. By the second week, their test pans suggested something unusual. Typical surface pay measured 0.5 to 0.8 grams per ton, barely enough to keep interest alive. But from a narrow fault cut near the west slope, the black sands produced 6.2 grams per ton, then 9.1 grams, numbers high enough to stop conversation mid-sentence. Freddy's hands paused over the water pan, his face set with a familiar quiet excitement. Beneath black sand, flakes gleamed like tiny sparks in deep shadow. Not specks, shards, dense and heavy. Cautiously, they widened the dig. Days stretched into nights. Water pumps ran non-stop. Spoil piles rose like growing hills. Every reading pointed deeper, where the ground felt unnaturally cold, as if guarding something ancient. When their drill samples struck quartz, shot through with visible gold ribboning, everything changed. The core measured 28 ounces per ton, a staggering concentration. If the channel continued, it could easily reach multi-million potential. The work intensified. Excavators cut through stubborn permafrost pockets, while ground support cables stabilized the roof. Every move was deliberate. A collapse could erase the vein forever. After 14 hours underground, one final blast revealed a glittering cavity, a stream of gold locked in ancient quartz. The first clean tally suggested a value near $9.7 million. This wasn't just a strike, it was a legend reborn. As Freddy ran his glove across the glowing rock, the old prospector's story no longer felt like rumor. It felt like a promise kept by the earth itself. And while the men recorded numbers, reinforced walls, and planned the next extraction cycle, another mystery stirred on the eastern ridge, where abandoned timber shafts hinted that the ghost vein might not end here at all, but continue toward a deeper, older channel that no record ever mentioned, where water still ran beneath rock, whispering that fortune waited for those willing to follow its hidden course. Without slowing their breath, Freddy and Juan prepared for the next descent, unaware that the real test, one measured in risk, darkness, and time, was only just beginning. The claim sat deep in a forgotten valley once touched by the late 1800s gold rush, where rusted boiler tanks lay half-buried in moss and crooked tailings still traced the last paths of desperate men. Freddy Dodge and Juan Ibarra unfurled what remained of the original mining records, torn notebooks, faded maps marked in charcoal, and the names of crews who never returned. Many miners swore that the gold here was alive, drifting deeper each season, hiding in stone that refused to give itself up. More than 30 shafts had been dug between 1894 and 1911, and yet none produced a vein stable enough to mine long-term. The promise faded, leaving the valley quiet, but never empty. With careful steps, Freddy and Juan began where their predecessors had stopped. The scattered tailings piles, thick mounds of wasted rock where someone had once believed riches lay. Juan's first pass with the ground scanner returned almost nothing. But slowly, as they adjusted their grid, faint signals pulsed beneath the upper shale. The readings weren't chaotic like surface gold. They were consistent, rhythmic, deep. The machine registered mineral concentrations up to 7 to 11 parts per million, unusually high for such untouched ground. Freddy knelt and studied the soil. Fine black sand streaked with quartz fragments. He rolled a dull pebble in his palm and saw the slightest metallic flash. Another sign. They began chipping stone along a narrow vertical fault that split the hillside. Every strike felt like the echo of a pickaxe from another century, a gesture shared by two eras of treasure seekers. The quartz they uncovered measured nearly 240 meters along a subtle curve, an orientation that matched a long-ignored note in an 1898 journal. The richest stone bends as water once did. Shifting carefully, they drilled 3 core samples at increasing depths, 18 feet, 26 feet, and 39 feet. The first 2 were promising. The third changed everything. The core sparkled with micro-gold woven through milky quartz. Lab estimates suggested 18 to 24 ounces of gold per ton, a concentration nearly 30 times higher than the nearby district averages. If the vein extended horizontally, as early signs showed, it could be worth a fortune far beyond the expectations of the old-timers. They widened the channel cautiously, stabilizing fractured rock with timber braces. Every strike revealed new color, gold threaded like lightning through the ancient stone. Freddy brushed away dust with his glove, realizing they were touching rock untouched by sunlight for millennia. This was no random deposit. It was a structured vein, continuous, stable, and astonishingly pure. And then the discovery intensified. A second scan deeper beneath the wall returned even stronger signatures, dense pockets of precious metal hidden farther inside. Juan whispered the numbers as he read, 42 to 55 ounces per ton, with preliminary valuation suggesting nearly $9.7 million if the vein ran the predicted length. It was more than a strike. It was history refusing to stay buried. Their breaths came slower, not from fatigue, but reverence. The ground beneath them was not just rich, it was alive with memory. Men had once died trying to reach this very seam. Now Freddy and Juan stood at its doorway, careful, deliberate, and humbled by the weight of what the earth offered. Without pause, they marked the next drill sites and prepared their tunneling rig, unaware that the deeper signs hinted at something stranger still, an uncharted fork buried beneath the eastern where water seeped silently through stone, guarding secrets older than the maps themselves, and where their journey would soon cross into territory no miner, living or lost, had ever dared to claim. The valley floor had been quiet for more than a century, shadowed by abandoned cabins and collapsed shafts from the Klondike era. Men of the late 1890s to 1910s once chased fortunes here, leaving behind rusting pans, broken picks, and scribbled notes about a ghost vein that appeared only briefly before slipping deeper into the mountain. These stories were dismissed as exaggerations until Freddy Dodge and Juan followed the evidence. By late August 2024, after weeks of mapping fractures and analyzing mineral gradients, they targeted a shallow bend in the old river channel. Here, early miners washed gravel only briefly before moving on, convinced the pay streak ended abruptly. But Freddy believed they had stopped just short of greatness. With slow and deliberate method, Juan scraped a modest pan of material from the channel's lower edge, rock that hadn't been disturbed since its last frozen flood event nearly 12,000 years ago. The moment the dirt hit the metal pan, silence took over. Freddy crouched, hands steady, as he began to swirl water through the black sand. At first, nothing. Then, tiny flecks of dull yellow caught the light, brightening as sediment washed away. More swirling, more color. And then suddenly, an eruption of gold dust shimmered like embers from a fire. Concentrated, heavy, undeniably rich. The concentration was staggering. 46.8 grams per ton, nearly 60 times higher than typical yields in this district. Juan looked twice, stunned. This was no surface fluke. It was the first sign of a deeper, monstrous deposit hiding beneath layers of untouched earth. Their heartbeats sharpened. The pan felt heavier than metal. This first flash wasn't just promising, it was prophetic. Freddy sampled 3 nearby pockets to confirm. Each pan returned high-grade gold, ranging from 29 to 53 grams per ton, evidence of a vein wide enough to justify extraction. Soil isotopic readings suggested that the source was intact and close, likely less than 20 feet below their position. The ghost vein, once legend, now breathed beneath their boots. It became immediately clear. They were standing at the threshold of a jackpot that could reach $9.7 million, depending on vein extension and purity. The whispers of the past, those miners who tried and failed, suddenly felt louder, as though urging them forward. The discovery linked 2 centuries of human hope, those who had sought fortune and those still daring to. Carefully, they deepened the channel. Every inch of movement was recorded, measured, and supported. They reinforced the slope with steel ribs and anchored ground plates, refusing to let the fragile vein collapse. Freddy's voice stayed calm, but his hands trembled with awe. This was the kind of gold most miners only dream of discovering once in a lifetime. And just beyond the shimmering pan, the instruments registered another anomaly, one stronger, deeper, running at a sharp diagonal beneath the eastern lip of the river bed. Beneath gravel and quartz streaking, they detected a branching structure, possibly a secondary feeder vein bleeding into the main ghost streak. The readings pulsed with mineral density far exceeding the first zone, signaling that the real heart of the treasure lay still ahead. Without pause, they traced this new direction, unaware that the deeper chamber held not only greater gold, but evidence of older workings, tools, and mineral scars, hinting that others may have stood here long before records were written. Their quest now merging with a past never fully explained. Freddy Dodge and Juan Ibarra's path led them beneath a fractured hillside once carved by miners of the 1898 Klondike expansion, where unfinished tunnels and rotten timbers hinted at desperate attempts to chase a vein that kept slipping away. Nearly every map from the period showed a promising streak running southwest, but all recorded work stopped abruptly at 110 feet, suggesting either collapse, abandonment, or something more mysterious. Freddy and Juan believed the old-timers had simply missed the true direction. Their instruments told a new story, one that pointed deeper. By early September 2024, the team began tunneling past the historical cutoff. Their equipment rumbled in the narrow dark. Hydraulic drills biting through slate and compressed gravel. The mountain resisted. Walls shuddered under pressure, and groundwater seeped like cold breath from ancient cracks. Each step forward came with reinforcement. Steel frames every 2.4 meters, roof bolting to maintain stability, and continuous pressure monitoring. Nothing was rushed. Every motion was planned. Their guiding thread was faint, but unwavering. Geological scans showed a mineralized stripe, quartz with intense gold signature, descending at a shallow 17-degree angle. They followed it like blood through a vein. At 141 feet, the rock face began to vibrate under the drill, signaling a hollow cavity beyond. Juan paused. The air changed, cooler, denser, carrying the metallic scent of untouched stone. They cut through the final barrier by hand, chiseling slowly to avoid collapsing what might be a fragile chamber. The final crack opened like a wound, releasing stale air older than memory. Flashlights swept into the void. What they saw next felt unreal. A channel of shimmering quartz, ran along the chamber wall, broad, clean, and pulsing with color. It was the ghost vein, fully exposed. High-grade gold ran through it like poured fire, thick and undisturbed. Freddy scraped a small sample. Flakes rained down like stars, heavy and bright. On-site analysis estimated 52 to 78 ounces of gold per ton, an astronomical value. If the chamber extended even a few meters, it could exceed $9.7 million in recoverable gold. The river of wealth appeared frozen in time, sealed behind compression and silence for thousands of years. Mountain sediment suggested that this chamber survived at least 2 major fault shifts and glacial movements. The old miners had been close, less than 30 meters from this point, but turned in the wrong direction, missing the true heart of the vein. Freddy and Juan moved methodically, marking extraction lines and reinforcing the cavity. Water seeped from the far wall, indicating a natural feeder stream that may have once transported gold from higher elevations. This hinted that the vein might continue deeper, possibly feeding a lower pocket where gold settled in even denser form. As they documented the chamber, Juan noticed something at the chamber's base: dark gravel and timber fragments embedded in old mudflow. These materials didn't match the surrounding rock, suggesting earlier attempts to reach this space, attempts never recorded. Someone had once known this hidden place existed and had failed to claim it. While Freddy recorded structural notes, a secondary scan pulsed from the western corner. Strong, steady, indicating a branching zone with even higher conductivity. Without breaking rhythm, they shifted direction, following the subtle signal into a narrow fissure. The gold signatures grew stronger, thicker, as if the vein were leading them onward, deeper, towards something not just richer, but older, waiting beyond the chamber's golden glow. The chamber that Freddy Dodge and Juan Ibarra opened in mid-September 2024 was unlike anything recorded from the Klondike expansion. Beneath 140-plus feet of fractured shale, the mountain finally surrendered its secret. A ghost vein burning through quartz with a brilliance unseen in over a century of mining. Unlike the small stringers that fooled old-timers in the 1890 to 1910 gold rush, this vein showed continuity, thickness, clarity, and purity far beyond speculation. Their first haul proved it. Bucket after bucket came up heavy, dense, with gold-rich ore. The test pans, washed under low light at the mouth of the tunnel, glittered with flakes and coarse fragments that clung to the black sand like molten sparks. The earliest assays returned staggering numbers: 67 to 94 ounces per ton, a grade nearly 50 times the regional average, and enough to confirm the chamber held a fortune. Early projections placed the accessible pay at $2.7 million, though deeper scans hinted the full structure could reach nearly $9.7 million if the vein maintained thickness. Freddy paused often, not from fatigue, but reverence. Every chunk of quartz felt like a page ripped from history. Gold forged over tens of millions of years, never touched by human hands, protected by pressure, darkness, and chance. Juan handled each piece carefully. He knew that miners before them had died chasing legends that never materialized. Yet here, reality exceeded folklore. They advanced slowly. The vein averaged 1.3 to 1.8 meters thick, broader than any previous discovery in the district. It followed a gentle downward sweep, mirroring an ancient waterway, a geological fingerprint suggesting that glaciers and subsurface runoff once carried microscopic gold into a natural trap where heat and pressure fused it into solid ribbons. The heart of the vein appeared stable, without major fault breaks, an extremely rare formation in this terrain. Still, the mountain resisted. Rocks shifted. Cavities moaned as weight redistributed. The deeper they went, the stronger the gold signature became, almost surreal in concentration. Freddy reinforced the chamber every 3 meters with steel lattice and expanding grout, ensuring the walls wouldn't collapse under their own history. Their instruments were constantly recalibrated. Even minor data misreads in this zone meant risking millions. Nearby tailings told a silent story. Old pick marks, fragments of rusted metal, and a handful of wooden wedges near the lower seam suggested that some long-forgotten miner once found traces of this very vein. But without modern mapping, they dug upward instead of downward, turning away from the richest section by less than 9 meters. One wrong direction, one collapsed shaft, and the legend was lost for generations. Now Freddy and Juan stood where those men never reached. The gold they touched was dense and ancient, the kind that melts black under torchlight and folds into itself like syrup. This wasn't loose placer, it was the mountain's heart, unbothered by time, untouched by river or storm, waiting in silence for the right hands. And as they mapped the far edge of the chamber, a new reading emerged, steady, concentrated, running parallel to the main vein, but deeper still. Without breaking pace, Juan marked a fresh grid and laid down seismic sensors. The data returned stronger than expected, a secondary load, possibly older, branching west beneath a narrow stone ramp. Its values registered even higher than the primary vein, suggesting not only greater purity, but a deeper chamber hidden beyond. The discovery was far from over. The ghost vein had shown its heart, but its soul still waited in the dark. The last 48 hours underground felt stitched together by instinct rather than sight. Every cut, every sample, every shift in the mountain's pulse had been measured with precision. Freddy and Juan refused even a millimeter of reckless digging. Their discipline, sharpened across decades of gold rush experience, kept them alive inside a mountain that seemed determined to silence them. The walls pressed tight. Cold water crept between veins. The generator's hum blended with their own heartbeats as they lifted the final bucket from the newly exposed ghost seam. And then the light changed. Inside that metal scoop, gold flared brighter than their lamps. Heavy, flaky, unmistakable. It didn't trickle like loose dust. It pooled thick as wet sunlight. Juan froze mid-breath. Freddy's boots rooted into the mud. Neither spoke. The world narrowed to a single shining truth. They'd cracked open a secret that had slept for centuries beneath mountains older than memory. Their careful logs told the numbers: 32 feet tunneled in 4 days, 7 diagnostic tests along the seam, purity levels repeatedly clocking above 92%. Their running estimator projected yields beyond belief, over $9.7 million trapped inside this ghost vein. The final scoop alone carried nearly 18 ounces, a staggering confirmation that their calculated risk had found a heart of treasure no map had ever named. For several minutes, time simply refused to move. The air tasted like stone dust and shock. Their gloves shook. That shimmering mass didn't feel like something earned. It felt like something granted. Freddy bowed his head, whispering that this was the kind of strike old prospectors swore was alive, that the mountain guards its heart and only releases it to those who respect it. Juan nodded because he felt it too. They were no longer digging for the mountain, but with it. Neither shouted. No cameras, no noise, just 2 men and a vein that had waited through collapsing tunnels, snowbound seasons, and the bones of those who sought it long before. Above them, centuries of silence felt like a choir. The ground that once threatened to bury them now seemed to breathe with pride. Their notes continued: consistent tonnage, density readings, approximate pocket lengths, because the work demanded proof, not myth. But nothing on paper could capture the weight of that moment. Freddy, the ghost vein wasn't a single channel. It twisted like a buried river into deeper shadow. That meant more gold, older and untouched, its yield still uncounted. Their victory, instead of closing the chapter, pushed it forward without pause. They were not finished. The mountain was still speaking. And step by careful step, they followed.